Today, I'm delighted to welcome Michael Simeone, who will be telling us about engaging faculty research activity with AI technologies at ASU, or Arizona State University. But I want to pause before we get started to remind you that this event, like all of our events, is guided by our code of conduct. You can find that code linked in the footer of our website. That URL is on the next page, or you can use your phone to snap this QR code that will take you there as well. Before we get into our welcome for our speaker, I just wanted to take a brief moment. For those of you who are not familiar with the Academic Data Science Alliance, or ADSA or ADSA, we are a community of data science leaders, practitioners, and educators who believe in a just, equitable future where data science approaches are thoughtfully applied in all domains for the benefit of all. If you want to learn more about our events and activities, as I mentioned in the last slide, you can come check us out at our website. The URL is in the bottom of this slide. And here's another QR code for your phone that will also take you there. So now I'm delighted to welcome Michael Simeone. Michael is a researcher interested in multidisciplinary data science. He currently serves as the co-lead of the Information Competition Lab in the School for Complex Adaptive Systems at Arizona State University and a domain champion for Humanities for the Extreme Science and Engineering Discovery Experiment. He also serves on the senior leadership team for the Global Futures Lab Decision Theater and is an affiliate of the Innovative Software and Data Analysis Division at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. He was the founding director of the Nexus Lab for Transdisciplinary Informatics at ASU from 2013 to 2016, and the founding director of the Unit for Data Science and Analytics at ASU Libraries from 2016 to 2022. Michael's research includes multidisciplinary data science, post-cybernetic culture and technology, analysis of human technology networks, data visualization, and data-driven collaborations that bridge environmental sciences and the humanities. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael. I am faculty in the School for Complex Adaptive Systems at Arizona State University. I really want to thank Michaela and the whole ADSA for having me as a guest this, I think, what is now, for most people, the afternoon. I do want to talk a little bit about a project we worked on over the last semester and that we're still kind of combing through the results. And all of this has to do with understanding what faculty practice and interest is around artificial intelligence. And I should say at first that, I'm aware, and I know everyone on this call is aware that people have been into AI before AI was cool. And now we're saying AI mostly to designate large language models. But some of what I do at Arizona State University is to work with Arizona State University Knowledge Enterprise. Knowledge Enterprise is the division of the university that is interested in kind of cultivating sponsored research and collaborative research. And so a lot of what Knowledge Enterprise interests lie in include what faculty want to get out of AI in general, or AI in terms of large language models, and what their research horizons and practices, what they want them to look like or what they have looked like. And so part of what we were interested in was just trying to learn a little bit about AI and what that meant to people. Can everyone see this image? Hey,
Yes.
terrific. Okay, outstanding. So a main thing here is, or a quick background. Everyone, if you're not familiar with Arizona State University, it is really big. Our undergraduates number in the tens of thousands. We have three major locations in Tempe, Arizona, in downtown Phoenix, Arizona, and then in the West Valley, which is about a 30-minute drive from the main Tempe campus. Now, I say that because a lot of the context of what I'm going to talk about is the scale of a large university, but a lot of the lessons learned or some of the thoughts I'm hoping are translatable, or at least useful as you practice AI work or want to learn more about AI work or get collaborations going at your own campuses and institutions. So I want to start with this image, which is, well, I mean, how many people have seen something like this before? Um, if anyone had to guess how I came across this image or produced this image. What do you think I needed to do? If you said just Google the word AI or Google the terms artificial intelligence, this is what you get. I I really dislike these kinds of images because they don't tell us anything uh, about AI in general. They're kind of senseless and silly, but yet, like, it's kind of the dominant way that many people tend to visualize or understand AI. And when we're looking for graphics to kind of accompany any kind of material about AI, this is what we get. But I feel like it discloses something really important and something that was a kind of jumping off point for my work with Knowledge Enterprise at ASU. That is, we don't really know sometimes what AI means to people. And even if we have like a reasonable definition of what that term could be in light of the historical developments of AI through machine learning, or what large language models have kind of come to represent for people as more mature products and as transformer models become kind of more and more developed, what does AI look like in practice for different faculty? Oftentimes we end up with these generic images because we don't have a good sense of what it looks like in practice for everyday research. And so, taking that as a jumping off point, one of the things that were interested in was trying to understand what that looks like for faculty and other researchers at ASU. A lot of this is learning from the adoption of data science into universities over the last 20 years. Data science, right, as a lot of us have experienced, can mean everything and nothing at once. Data science could mean business analytics to some people. Data science could mean, statistical machine learning to people. Data science could just be working with data itself. You name it, people have used data science as a way to label that. But over the course of the last 20 years, I think it's, been a very interesting development to see different disciplines and disciplines as in academic disciplines, but then other kind of disciplines that aren't necessarily academic ones, but just communities of practice have defined what for them constitutes data science, or at least there's a little bit more of a well-defined expectation of what we want out of a data scientist or out of a data science team, which is different even from kind of 10 years ago, or maybe even just like a couple hilarious job postings lately, where a junior data scientist, the job description would look like a web developer, a machine learning scientist, a database engineer, just like we need a computer person. But now I think we've gotten a better sense of what that skill set distribution looks like, what those capacities look like, and what we might even want out of data science, depending on our field or academic interest. And so what we did was stage about a dozen conversations with faculty over the fall of 2024. And what this looked like was a solicitation that invited faculty to come, a mission statement that talked about why Knowledge Enterprise was so interested in learning from faculty, and a lot of it resembled the kind of conversation that I'm having with you right now. A good piece of what we want to do is understand that institutions work at different scales, that every institution is going to have a strategic vision for data science, for artificial intelligence and data science, or even transitioning data science into artificial intelligence. Um, but that top level institutional strategy is eventually going to have to meet the kind of low, and when I say low level, I'm thinking about it in terms of a system, not a hierarchy. Um, we're still going to have to look at what the practice layer looks like at an institution. And so, how does that practice layer inform strategy? And then what can we learn from that practice layer just in general? And then, what are some lessons learned just about how all of this is going? So all this is information that we're interested in collecting. And so we created these sessions where we engage faculty by rough disciplinary cluster. We did a survey of the institution in terms of what degree programs were offered, what some of the academic expertises were. For those of you not deeply familiar with ASU, this is an institution that does not have traditional colleges and does not divide knowledge up into traditional colleges. Just to name a really quick example, instead of having like a college of liberal arts and sciences that would typically have a history department or a philosophy department, right? Instead, there's a school for historical, philosophical, and religious studies. And all of those are together in a single school. And those might be in a college of liberal arts and sciences, but those schools and the school format within them as nodes within that network is a lot more blended and might seem non-traditional. I think other schools are doing similar things like this, depending on the institution, as ways to mix up the disciplinarity and encourage a little bit more collaboration. But largely construed, we can't just go down a list and say, okay, we've got it. We've got the social sciences all done because we went to the school for social science. That's no, we have to go to the school of social transformation. Oh, and also there's social scientists in the school for sustainability, and there's social scientists in math. So our attempt to bring people together had to be a little bit more synthetic in terms of our tent poles. But we had about 10 to 12 different conversations around things like space exploration, or ethics and society, humanities, arts, and social science, um, et cetera, et cetera. And so these were, or even something like health and public health. And we tried to distinguish that from medicine and bioinformatics. And so most of these conversations involved a lot of brainstorming. And we tried to get conversations of faculty where we could break them into groups of 4 or 5. And primarily what we wanted to do is understand their use of AI in 2 different ways. One is, how are they using it in their everyday life? And we wanted to be able to understand how AI or AI products were used just as employees. And so, did they use them to manage their calendar? Did they use these products to answer emails, or do other kinds of things that are largely associated with their job duties? But I think many folks wouldn't necessarily identify that with their research interest or their research activities. And so, tried to get them to, for the sake of the exercise, separate their administrative, operational self from their research inquisitor, scientist self, realizing that, sometimes that's just not possible. But did our best to try to get them to see themselves as operators and as investigators. And so, as operators, what was AI useful for? And we tried to get them to share that out. And then you can see this coming. The next bit was trying to get them to understand as investigators, which is, what were some of the key issues that might be interesting to them? Were there any kind of horizons that they were excited about? And then certainly, were there any concerns or hesitations that they had? And I think we tried to make sure, uh, in couching these exercises and in the facilitation of the events itself, that we weren't just looking for people to give us happy stories and to just step on the accelerator when it came to AI adoption and research that involves AI. One of the most interesting observations across the whole series of these focus groups or interviews with faculty is that universities, especially really big ones, are intellectually diverse and vibrant. I think oftentimes any kind of knowledge working organization ends up developing a really interesting kind of diversity in terms of what kinds of people are interested in, what their research specialties are, and what kind of even tacit knowledge people tend to absorb. So that if you talk to someone who's been doing natural language processing for 10 years, they just know how to call balls and strikes on an NLP workflow in a way that somebody who might technically also be a data scientist looks a little different. Their specialization. It's been interesting. But once we get to AI and everything just becomes AI, then all of a sudden that level of variation can be apparently erased, because now everyone's just trying to do AI, and we don't know what everyone's adoption looks like of AI, and we don't know what their use of that technology is, or we don't know if they have any interest in using this particular version of AI at all. And so we're really interested in trying to cut against that flattening effect and to try to see where AI really was a tent pole where people were uniting, but not just assume that to be the case, so that AI isn't just a lens that we're just going to read the entire university through. So we did try to encourage people to disclose their hesitations, their frustrations, or even their indifference to these kinds of technologies. And so just some variations here, a lot of different moods. I think we had people range from being, as you'd imagine, very, very excited about these technologies. Sometimes they'd be interested in those technologies as a research frontier. as in I'm an AI researcher. Transformer-based models are changing the game for me. They're becoming easier to develop and kind of deploy. Uh, I'm very excited about this, right? But that was a very small percentage of people of conversations that we actually had. Um, so many more people, if they were excited about these technologies, they were excited about AI as more of a companion and as someone to think with, rather than something necessarily to study directly. Um, and so that was an interesting population of researchers. Not everyone, but a bigger chunk than I think people would have expected going into this. Were thinking, hey, I don't study AI and I'm not going to study AI. But let me tell you, I'm really, really excited about instead of looking at a blank piece of paper, I really value using AI as a way to kind of get over that blank page effect. Not to generate text, but just to chat and get things going. Different motivations and uses, I think, for using AI. Plenty of people, I think, say things like, I didn't ask for this and I don't intend to use it. And I think there was plenty of variation in terms of what caused people to want to study AI. I think there was a good amount of people who wanted to basically antagonize these systems um, to be able to see where they would fail. And I think one of the most salient questions that emerged that never really got asked directly, except for one of the groups, was for someone to just say, like, isn't it isn't it our job to just see if any of this really works? Um, and that to me was a really simple but profound question, because the operational definition of works is going to vary from field to field and from use case to use case. And so I have this heuristic evaluations abound as a follow up to that thought, because people are just kind of like hitting these pipes with a wrench to try to see where the weak spots are. Because these systems aren't necessarily transparent, because oftentimes they haven't been deployed in some of the contexts that we're thinking about, from education all the way up to robotics and automation, we don't know how good they are at many, many things. And so much of the phase that many faculty are into, I think you have your computer scientists and lifelong AI researchers who are falling into categories that you might anticipate. But a good chunk of faculty are trying to understand how this works within the context of their own field, right? And to try to come up with an idea of what works even means for their field. And so, an area that I'm specifically interested in is an evaluation, right, of these kinds of systems. And we can see that performance evaluation for these kinds of systems looks a particular way. But any kind of standardized evaluation framework, or can it do math, or any of the ways that we try to operationalize a definition of performance is not suitable for different academic fields and subfields. They have to, or are in the process of figuring out what performance actually means, in addition to trying to use it to calendar appointments with students and other kinds of automation tasks that for some people have made their lives like significantly better according to their own testimony. Another big question that comes up is, what is the role of a college or university, as opposed to a private company, or even a public company that is largely for profit, as it pertains to AI. The pace of AI development is so fast, and that the pressure to be first or to scale is so high. Do universities need to be players in the AI breakthrough space? Do they need to be players in the what is the place of AI in our society space? What thought leadership gaps need to exist that universities can fill? This was, to me, in the wings of every single conversation that we had, is what's the broader role? And even if we are going to have, if every 3 months we're promised artificial general intelligence, has anyone thought through why we want it or what we want it to do? And I think there are large scale societal considerations for that, but then there are discipline specific considerations for all the impacts of what that means. And so a lot to think about. And I think as we see at the micro or lab level of people trying to understand, does this work? What does performance mean? What does this mean to my entire tradition of knowledge making? All of those concerns aggregate up together to what's the place of a college or university when it comes to doing AI. And I think how to transition, or how to move a data science team to become an AI team is a completely different conversation. That's not something we broached too much in these conversations, but you could really see people who had no experience in data science, or who never really got around to doing that machine learning project they'd been wanting to do for the last 10 years, who are now kind of leapfrogging into AI. And so, we're not seeing a sort of development along a linear track here where data science comes before AI, even if as practitioners or pedants, right? Myself, I would want people to go through that step. We're not seeing it. And then I think the last bit is we can see that there's a kind of would, could, should breakdown of people uh, who we talk to about AI, which is the would group, I think, is probably the most forward oriented about AI. In that, they say things like, okay, if I had this much GPU compute, or if I had this many students, here's what I would do. They're ready to go. They already know what they want. They have the models identified. This is what they want. They need hardware and resources. Then there's could, right? And these are the prospecting, more interdisciplinary thinkers who are like, well, could we use AI to do the following things? And I think that tends to be a much more interdisciplinary group. And that the more interdisciplinary, um, the more the prospecting. And I think in these cases, we don't have a fully developed sense of the exact resource needs that we would want. But I think these are the groups that need a ton of support, even if the would group gets the most attention right now. And so that group of inquisitors, right? Very important to pay attention to, in my opinion, in my experience. And then the last group is should. And this is, to me, the most underserved, but most difficult to serve group of all the faculty that we spoke to. And that is, should we be doing this at all? Or what should we be doing with AI? Now, these groups are tough in the sense that they are adopting, oftentimes, not always, at the slowest possible scale or being resistant to it. And all of their work isn't producing new AI technologies or research that directly uses AI. And so, depending on our orientation as an institution, we might not pay attention to that because we're very interested in novelty. We're not interested in review. And then sometimes unintentionally, we're not interested in moving slowly. And so, the should group oftentimes isn't in a lot of key conversations. And I don't mean institution wide, although that could certainly be the case depending on your own institution. I mean, in terms of interdisciplinary work, sometimes there's not as much emphasis on that. Long tradition of AI ethics, long tradition of responsible technology adoption. ASU as an institution prides itself in trying to emphasize responsible innovation. But I think even if you have all of those constructs in place as an institution, people who are antagonistic to the new technology and trying to ask, deep questions and put the brakes on adoption, it is very, very difficult historically to get this group involved. And so would is the group that I think oftentimes takes up a lot of airspace, but could and should are worth paying attention to and have their own contingencies and their own contributions to these conversations. And I think in general, to kind of tie it off and give us some pictures to look at, we've got kind of people who are searching and people who are wandering. Me, I'm a sucker for any graphics of a basset hound dressed up as a Victorian detective. And so we have it here. But I think it's important because most of the time, the searchers are looking for, they already have a sense of what they're going to do with AI and they can't wait to take off. Or after just a little bit of experimentation, they have a research agenda. But so many people are in the wandering position, which is they are wandering through these skills, they are wandering through these tools, sometimes not knowing that what's actually happening is trying to understand where they fit in with all of this. As I mentioned before, the kind of initiation of this entire project was trying to cut against the possibility or the risk that AI could flatten the intellectual culture of a knowledge making organization. And by trying to investigate kind of what people are doing, and now that AI is such an important kind of moment in knowledge making organizations, many people, it seems like, are trying to understand what their place is in all of this. And they might not have a good idea. And people are still trying to figure out what their role is in any kind of boom with large language models or whatever next generation of AI or kind of virtual agents is. And I think with that, I'll conclude with just a couple minutes left over for people to either finish up their lunch or we might even have a chance for a question. Thanks again for having me out. This is the first time I've had a chance to really talk about this synchronously, right? We've written a giant report about everything that we've done, but the opportunity to really just kind of sit down and talk about some of these higher level insights outside of a written report and of that kind of context. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all today.
Thank you so much, Michael. I have like a million questions, but I'm going to let the audience try to jump in first. Please either drop your question in the chat, or I guess if we're a small enough group, you can feel free to unmute. And while you're either typing or thinking, I wanted to just say very briefly, the report you just referenced, is that something that's going to be made publicly available?
Yeah, so that's it. The report is an internal report, but we're working on a white paper that's going to try to cement some of the insights that I spoke with you all about today. Um,
Great.
Again, just trying to think about what are some good things to consider as we think about institution-wide adoption or as we think about supporting people as they
Yeah.
start to identify or antagonize AI and how that can be like good for our organizations and our missions. So that full report is probably not going to become published, but there are going to be white paper versions of this material that we will make available and that we will certainly share with ADSA.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And along those lines, there's a question in the chat. Any thoughts as to how we can approach helping people figure out where they fit in the landscape? And I had a similar question. I think this is around the wanderers.
Yeah, I mean, universities, I think, are pretty good with seed grants. And I think historically, the tool that we use for this has often been seed grant programs to support people to try things out. But really, in my experience, one thing that faculty need is an excuse to talk to each other again. Um, Now, ASU is a really large one, and so my experience is probably going to be largely, colored by working at a very large scale institution. But I still feel like post pandemic, trying to even get people to attend these events in person was very difficult. And so there were many events that we wanted to be in person and where we ended up capitulating and doing Zoom because people were very resistant to showing up in person. Anyone who showed up in person discussed just how rewarding it was to be in person. I'm sure, I'm not the only person who can tell a story like this, an experience over the last few years. But I think oftentimes we go to seed grants for these kinds of things, and getting seed grant monies can sometimes be tricky, or even securing them for a center or institution that can be tricky. To me, even socializing people around the idea of talking about these things can be helpful. And I say this specifically because this is all so reasonably new that the typical tools that people use to locate themselves in their disciplinary spaces, they're just not there yet. So if the literature in your field is 2 years deep, 1 year deep, it's really hard to say, like, I've got these thoughts. I need to kind of bounce them around some sort of idea space. What do I got? Oh, I don't have anything. So colleagues can just be a really helpful way of at least fulfilling that function. So to me, a one quick start is going to be trying to find ways to bring people together to talk about this stuff. If it's a birds of a feather around a particular topic, I think those are, we have shown those, we have seen those to be productive. But I don't think there's anything wrong with just saying, attention historians, we're only going to be historians and we're only going to talk about this. And we're really actually interested in not necessarily turning our disciplinary orientation into a smoothie. No, we actually want to talk about the long arc of our disciplinary orientation and what it means here. So those are my thoughts there as a way to initiate some of this stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I was going to ask a question about that, but we're running out of time. I think there's a lot of value around bringing faculty together around a research topic, because you'll get this breadth of people. I'm thinking of the life sciences now, who may have implemented different AI tools, in their lab protocols and automation that then can be shared with others, and you get those aha moments in those small group discussions and opportunities to share not just what should we do, but what are we doing right now that somebody else could pick up, right? Okay, we
Yeah.
are already past our time. So thank you again so much for giving us that overview. That was really insightful. And I think everybody in the audience is going to get a lot of ideas for how to move these conversations forward at their own schools. Thank you for dropping your email address in the chat. For those of you who are with us right now, you can grab that. It sounds like, Michael, you're willing to take questions by email. All right,
Yeah, happy to chat more
fantastic.
about this.
Great. Thank you. And to everyone on the call, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.